Hello there and welcome to today's Pleasure Beach Experience video. Following on from feedback and comments on our recent YouTube videos from our trip to America, and as well as private messages on social media, we've decided it'd be a good idea to do a bit of a video about how to get from the UK to Cedar Point. Getting to Cedar Point from the UK can be quite difficult, but in today's video I'm going to run through what I personally think are the best options that you can take to get to Cedar Point on your next trip to America. So I do hope that you find this video useful, and if I do miss anything out and you know of any other ideas to get to Cedar Point that I don't cover in this video, please let us know in the comments. But in today's video I'm going to go through what I personally think are the best options of getting from the UK to Cleveland or to Detroit, which is another airport that's close to Cedar Point, and I'm going to run through all of those options, how you can get to the airports with which airline operators, which airports in the UK, and also just a general run through of what happens once you arrive in Cleveland or Detroit or another airport. How do you get to Cedar Point from those airports? So in today's video I'm going to run through all of that, and hopefully you're going to find this really useful when you're planning your next Cedar Point trip from the UK. The first option I would recommend anyone looking at planning a trip to Cedar Point from the UK would be to take a look at flying to Cleveland. With being based in the northwest of England, the first flight I would look at personally will be flying from Manchester to Cleveland, booked through Virgin Atlantic or Delta Airlines. This is an expensive option, but a good option for anyone from the northwest of England. The first part of the journey is usually with Virgin Atlantic from Manchester to an airport in the US. The US airport is determined at the time of the booking through Virgin Atlantic. Whichever airport the connecting flight may be from, you would have a layover time at that airport, and following on from that you would then catch your flight, operated by Delta Airlines usually, to Cleveland Hopkins Airport. This would all be shown up when you came to do the booking with either Virgin Atlantic or Delta Airlines. They would tell you what time you would get to the connecting airport, what the connecting airport would be, and what time your flight onward to Cleveland would be from the connecting airport. The connecting airport is decided by the airline who you book with. For example, the connecting airport for your flight onto Cleveland could be JFK, it could be Detroit, or it could be anywhere within a few hours of Cleveland. You can also fly from London Heathrow and Edinburgh to Cleveland with Virgin Atlantic and or Delta Airlines. All of these routes will require a change and a connecting flight onwards to Cleveland. But because the transfer is included in your booking, it is usually a very easy process to connect flights. It is also worth mentioning that Air Canada, United, American Airlines and British Airways all do various routes from the UK to Cleveland, but I must stress that getting to Cleveland from the UK is never a cheap option of getting to Cedar Point. If you decide to take the UK to Cleveland option, once you've arrived in Cleveland, the next stop is of course to get to Cedar Point. You can do this by either hiring a car or by public transport. If you do not drive or simply don't fancy driving in America, you can still get to Cedar Point from Cleveland. One of the most popular routes is to take a train from Cleveland to Sandusky. However, to do this, you first need to get to Cleveland Amtrak from the airport. The quickest way to do this is by taxi, otherwise you would need to take a few buses and it'll take a lot longer than a taxi. From Cleveland Amtrak, take the train to Sandusky Amtrak. Once you've arrived at Sandusky, I would recommend taking a taxi to Cedar Point or your accommodation nearby to Cedar Point. Otherwise, it is 2 more buses and a much longer journey time from Sandusky to Cedar Point. To summarise, take a taxi from the airport to Cleveland Amtrak, then take the train from Cleveland to Sandusky Amtrak, and on arrival at Sandusky Amtrak, take another taxi to your accommodation at Cedar Point or nearby to Cedar Point. Flying from the UK to Detroit was how I did my first visit to Cedar Point. Unfortunately, the way that I did that is no longer an option due to WOW Air going out of business in early 2019. This route, however, is still a possibility with other airlines if you are willing to drive from Detroit to Cedar Point. You can fly from London Heathrow to Detroit with Delta Airlines on a direct flight. However, most routes from the UK to Detroit will usually come with a layover time and a connecting flight. British Airways, American Airlines and United offer routes to Detroit from the UK, but all require passengers to connect at a US airport onto Detroit. I would recommend, for ease and comfort, taking the direct flight to Detroit from London Heathrow with Delta if flying to Detroit is your preferred route to take to Cedar Point. But something you should be mindful of when booking this route is the cost of a car hire. The cost of a car hire could eventually mean you've paid the same flying to Detroit and getting to Cedar Point as you would have done flying to Cleveland and going from there to Cedar Point. Cedar Point is around a 2-hour drive from Detroit in a hire car. This is not a particularly bad thing. However, getting from Detroit to Cedar Point via public transport is really not worth considering. It is a long journey via buses and trains, which will be an expensive option. Or you would need to book a taxi, which will probably cost just as much as hiring a car. Flying to Cleveland is the most direct route to Cedar Point from the UK. Flying to Detroit isn't too far behind that if you are willing to hire a car. But there is other options, and you can be quite flexible with the route you're willing to take if you plan on hiring a car, because there is quite a lot of coaster credits that you can tick off between airports and Cedar Point in the US. For example, you could fly to Chicago, and if you were to hire a car and didn't mind going back on yourself, you could head to Six Flags Great America, which isn't too far from Chicago Airport. And also, if you were willing to drive from Chicago to Cedar Point, Indiana Beach is on the way. However, it is a 5-hour drive at least from Chicago O'Hare Airport to Cedar Point. Another option is that you could fly from the UK to Chicago, get the Six Flags Great America credits, and then take an internal flight from Chicago to Cleveland. In June 2019, we took the option of flying from the UK to New York JFK and turned our trip into a coaster credit trip rather than a sole Cedar Point trip. In doing so, we managed to visit both Coney Island and Six Flags Great Adventure before making our way to Cedar Point. Flying into JFK to eventually reach Cedar Point by road is a long, tiresome way of getting to Cedar Point, and speaking from experience, it's not something that I would recommend unless you plan on visiting a lot of theme parks on your way from New York to Cedar Point. You can fly to JFK from the UK with most long-haul airline operators from the majority of UK airports. The best time to book any of these flight options is usually to do it around Christmas time or in the new year, when a lot of the long-haul flight operators have Christmas or New Year sales on. To summarise the flight options, I would personally look at flying from the UK to Cleveland if you're looking to make it a simple trip. Sure, it is the most expensive option of getting to Cedar Point from the UK. However, it is probably the easiest option, especially if you don't really fancy hiring a car, because there is options of getting from Cleveland Hopkins to Cedar Point without having to sit in the driver's seat of a car. However, if you do drive, I would totally recommend flying to Cleveland, getting a hire car, driving yourself to Cedar Point. Now that we've taken a look at the flights over to Cleveland from the UK or Detroit, or maybe you're going to go on a road trip and do a couple of credits before you get to Cedar Point, it's time to start thinking about where you're going to stay when you get to Cedar Point. Now there is a lot of options here. It's a lot easier than organising which flight you're going to take to get over to Cedar Point. There is of course a couple of options on site at Cedar Point. You've got Hotel Breakers, which is literally within the park's grounds. You've got Hotel Express, or the Express Hotel even, which is on Cedar Point Drive. It's about a 5-minute drive to the park entrance. You've got Castaway Bay, I think that's what it's called. That's another one of the hotels that Cedar Point have got. And also there's Lighthouse Point. Again, I'm not 100% sure if I've got the names right. If I haven't, I'll put a little blue bar at the bottom of the screen with the correct names. And of course I will put links to the hotels in the description of this video to make it really easy for you to find the hotel that you want to stay at when you go to Cedar Point. Now, I would always pick Hotel Breakers after our stay there in June 2019. That being just for purely because of the convenience. Not only did we get a great deal on the hotel, but when you stay there, you feel like you're in a proper resort. It almost feels like you're staying somewhere like Disney or Universal, not because it's themed, not because it's magical in that way, it's just because of the way that it is. It's so close to the rides, it's so close to Lake Erie. You can either spend time on the boardwalk, you can spend time on the beach by Lake Erie. It does have a little beach, Lake Erie. Or on the other side, you've of course got the rides. And even if you just fancy sitting outside watching the rides, you can do that. And also there's a water park as well, the Cedar Point Shores. That's right next to Hotel Breakers. So we stayed there a couple of weeks ago now, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now, and I can't recommend it enough. The deal that we got, I know that a lot of people are keen for us to do a price breakdown on the trip to America that we've just recently done. Now, breaking it all down in this video is probably not the right time, but to give you an idea of what we paid for Hotel Breakers, we paid around £750 each. Now that might sound like a lot of money, but that was for 5 nights, 3 days on the park, 1 day in the water park, but we got early access to Cedar Point every day, so we got in an hour before the general public. It was hotel guest DRT every morning. Again, it might not sound like a good deal at this point, but there is more. So included in the deal was 3 days Fast Lane Plus at Cedar Point. Now I believe that's $85 a day if you were to do it on the day. So again, I think that's a good deal. We got that every day, and also included, I think I've already said, we got access to the water park. We got free parking if we needed it. We didn't use free parking because we were on the car park at Breakers anyway. You can get in to Cedar Point right next to Magnum XL 200 if you stay at Hotel Breakers, which of course for us Arrow fanboys, that is ideal, especially if it's on the hotel guest DRT, which it was on this occasion. But not only that, it's not just there's your hotel, there's your water park, that's all you're getting. There's an indoor pool, there's an outdoor pool, there's a hot tub or a jacuzzi outside, there's a TGI Fridays on site, there's Domino's Pizza on site, there's a place called Perkins on site. There's so much on site. Of course, you've got plenty of parking for everyone. The rooms come with excellent views. Like I think I've already said, you either get a perfect view of Cedar Point or you get a view of Lake Erie. There's a bar. There's just so much. There's so much more that we didn't explore in that hotel that probably should have had a look at, to be honest. But I would totally recommend staying at Hotel Breakers. Now, I know, like I say, it probably sounds like a lot of money, but when you're planning to go to Cedar Point and you think, you know what, I'm going to treat myself, I'm going to take the expensive flight option, I'm going to take the expensive hotel option. When you look at booking Hotel Breakers, or this goes with any of the Cedar Point hotels, they have an offer on around Black Friday time. So it's end of November, start of December time. Keep an eye on it, keep an eye on Cedar Point socials, because what we did is we booked on the Cyber Monday offer that they had on, which was a big discount on what the hotel would have been for everything that we got if we'd have booked it outside of the deal time. So we got a really good deal on it. Now it's worth knowing as well, when you book your hotel at Cedar Point, you don't have to pay it all up front. You get 2 options. You can do what is called Easy Pay, and now you get 6 payments where you can do it over 6 payments basically. So they'll take a deposit, which for us was around $250, $300, and then each month they take a certain amount, and they tell you all of this. They tell you when they're going to take it, what date they're going to take it, and they set it out in a nice easy email telling you when they're going to do it. So that is the best option. If you're on a tight budget and you think, do you know what, I want to stay there but I can't do it all at once, well, Easy Pay is perfect because you can do it over 6 payments. Like I said, they do take not a big deposit, but they do take a fair bit of money straight off, but it makes it a lot easier than paying it all at once. There is also an option, I believe, to pay on arrival, which I believe some of our group did do on the most recent trip we've had to Cedar Point. That goes with all the hotels. You can do that at the Express Hotel, and I'd imagine you could do it for the other 2 as well. I have also stayed in the Express Hotel at Cedar Point. I stayed there in 2018. I wouldn't recommend staying there unless you're driving, because otherwise you're going to have to get a taxi or a bus into the park every day. I must admit, I don't know if they run a shuttle bus from the other hotels that aren't on site. I would imagine they do, but honestly I don't know because I've always hired a car. Now if you don't want to stay at Cedar Point, that is of course fine, because there is hotels in the local area. Of course I don't know the names of them, I've never stayed at them, but if you were to go on hotels.com or booking.com, pretty certain that you would find probably a fairly priced hotel that is nowhere near the price of the hotels at Cedar Point. But of course you wouldn't get early access to the rides, you wouldn't get park entry and stuff like that. So if you're going to do this trip, in my opinion, I would say stop at Cedar Point, because you get the full works. You get park entry, you get early entry to the park, you're most likely going to get fast lane, and sometimes you get other deals, whereas the year before we got food vouchers as well. We got all day dining, fast lane, and I think we also got what's it called, the fun pick, so the on-ride photos, unlimited on-ride photos was included last year. So yeah, it just depends what deal's on at the time that you're booking really, but totally recommend doing it in November. So I know that if there's going to be a lot of you booking Cedar Point, they might well sell out for pretty much at some point, because there might be a load of Brits going over at the same time, especially if loads of us go for Costa Mania next year. If we're all looking at the same weekend and we're all booking hotel breakers, you might find that they might get a lot of bookings from Britain come end of November. But I would totally recommend looking at it at the end of November when there's a sale on around Black Friday or Cyber Monday time of year. That is the best time for me, in my opinion, to look at it, because that is the time that you're going to get some deals. There is other times you put deals on, but off the top of my head, I don't know when they are. So like I say, if you are going full on with this trip, stay at Breakers. If you're not and you fancy doing it on a bit of a budget, check out the other hotels. They are a little bit cheaper than Breakers, but I think for convenience, especially if you've had a long day on park, like Costa Mania, if you're going to go for Costa Mania, it's like a 16-hour day on park. You'd sometimes want to just go back to the hotel and think, do you know what, I'm just going to put my feet up for 20 minutes, maybe even an hour. In some cases, you might want to sleep. This time, Mike stayed at the Express Hotel, and I think on Costa Mania Day, he regretted it because he wanted to go for a nap, which meant he had to go to the car park, get in the car hire, drive to the hotel, which is 5 minutes away, go there, but then he had to come back, find a space, get back in the park. Whereas at Breakers, it's simple. You go to Magnum, you have a ride on Magnum first, go out of the park, go to the hotel, and you just chill out. So yeah, there is lots of options, but if you're going to pick a hotel at Cedar Point, make it Hotel Breakers. You won't regret it. So I think that is pretty much it for me and my tips for you getting to Cedar Point in 2020 or further beyond that. I would totally recommend going. If you're looking at maybe doing an America trip next year and you're thinking, do I go to Cedar Point or do I go to Florida? Do I go to California? California is great, I'm sure of it. I've never been. I will go at some point. Florida is great, but it's at this point, Cedar Point's there. Cedar Point's a level above Florida. So if you're thinking, do I go to Florida or do I go to Cedar Point? Make it Cedar Point. Better rides, better park than anything that's in Florida. Florida is great, but Cedar Point's on another level. So if you're planning your trip to America in 2020, make it Cedar Point. You won't regret it. You'll get to ride Steel Vengeance, Millennium Force, Magnum XL 200, and all the great coasters and rides that Cedar Point has got. And also you will meet so many great people at Cedar Point. You will in Florida too, but Cedar Point, in my experience, has the best staff when it comes to American amusement parks. So yeah, that is it from me. Before I do go, quickly, check out the card in the top of the screen. PBE does now have a Teespring store connected to this YouTube channel. We'd love it if you checked it out. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next Pleasure Beach Experience video.